Improving government efficiency, China announces a major overhaul of government agencies under the State Council. Rooting out corruption, China's top justice and procurator delivered reports on efforts to stamp out what's been called the biggest threat to the ruling party's survival. South Korea and the United States are set for more joint drills, which the DPRK labels a hostile act. And politics after Chavez, Venezuela's acting president Nicolas Maduro calls elections on April the 14th. Hello there, welcome to News Hour on CCTV News. Live from Beijing, I'm Pan Dong. We start this program with the latest from China's annual political season. The Secretary-General of the State Council, Ma Kai, has delivered a plan to restructure government at the annual session of the country's top legislature. The proposal dissolves 4 ministry-level institutes and cuts out 2 ministries and commissions. After the reorganization, the State Council will have 25 ministries and commissions.
This round of reform is a targeted and efficient approach. It aims at making breakthroughs in some important areas and solving difficult social issues to promote economic development. The reform is to create a sound development environment for the government, provide high-quality public services, and maintain just and fair social order. It focuses on clarifying the role of government in developing the market and society.
Now let's take a look at the main points of the State Council's reorganization plan.
China will split the Ministry of Railways into administrative and commercial arms. The proposed State Railway Administration, to be supervised by the Ministry of Transport, will run the existing Railway Ministry's administrative functions. The proposed China Railway Corporation will run the passenger and freight operations. Also, China plans to set up a National Health and Family Planning Commission by merging the existing Health Ministry with the National Population and Family Planning Commission. The existing state administration of traditional Chinese medicine, currently affiliated with the Health Ministry, will be administered by the proposed National Health and Family Planning Commission. Further changes will be made to Food and Drug Administration to enhance safety and quality. The proposed ministry-level general administration will be responsible for supervising food and drug safety in the process of production, circulation, and consumption. To step up cultural reform and coordinate resources of each sector, the existing General Administration of Press and Publication and the State Administration of Radio, Film, and Television will be integrated into one single regulatory authority. Its work will focus on the planning of the development of the sectors, supervising the contents and quality of institutions, publications, and programs, and administering copyright. The State Council also plans to restructure the country's top oceanic administration to enhance maritime law enforcement and better protect and use its oceanic resources. The restructured State Oceanic Administration will report to the Ministry of Land and Resources, and a high-level National Oceanic Commission will be established to strengthen overall planning and comprehensive coordination of maritime affairs. The reorganization plan also includes the restructure of the National Energy Administration. A new administration will be formed by merging the National Energy Administration and the State Electricity Regulatory Commission. The proposed administration's responsibilities include drawing up and carrying out energy development strategy, planning and policies, studying and proposing energy system reforms, and energy supervision and management.
For more on this ambitious plan, let's cross live to my colleague Tian Wei at Great Hall of the People in central Beijing. Hello, Tian Wei. First, can you tell us why it's necessary to carry out this reorganization?
Well, Pandong, this is supposed to be the 7th largest government restructuring in decades for the Chinese government, and also it is the biggest since 1998. There are several issues it seems that the government restructuring plan this time are likely to address. Many of them are quite controversial issues or urgent issues that the Chinese society has to face right now. For example, the Ministry of Railway, it used to play a role of both an administrative power and also providing services. Certainly there's a conflict of interest, and now it's being divided into two parts, the administrative branch and then the commercial entity. There are also issues that are very important for the Chinese society to face, for example, the safety of the drug and food. And that is why the National Administration of Food and Drug Safety has been elevated to a national level to embody this organization to have more power to monitor the situation. And meanwhile, there's the merge of both the Ministry of Health and the Administration of Population and Family Planning. As you may know, once this merge has already been done, this organization is going to play a huge role in China's healthcare reform, as well as designing and readjusting the family planning policy for the current changes of China's demography. And then there is also the reform of the State Administration of Oceanic. There has been a lot of talk about too much division of responsibility and neighbor in terms of reinforcing the maritime law, and now it's already been streamlined under one umbrella. But this is a very grand plan. How is it likely to be the result, though? Only time could tell. Pandong.
Well, Tianwei, you've mentioned that it's a grand plan, and from the proposal this time, we could see that reorganization is just a part of that grand plan. So what are the ultimate goals of government reorganization?
But as we mentioned earlier, this is the 7th in recent decades for government restructuring. Certainly, there have been successes that we witnessed over the past few years in terms of the previous round of government restructuring. But this time, the aim, according to the plan from the State Council, is more about letting the government, or rather letting the market, I emphasize again, the market playing a more important role in allocating resources. And the plan said the government organizations and departments has been emphasizing too much on the micro issues, but they argue that should not be the role of the government. Instead, it should concentrate on some very important issues. For example, there has to be more clearer division of labor, responsibility, and power, and that is the sole purpose of this specific government restructuring plan. Having said that, though, there's another point which is very important. They set aside the social issues and strengthened the responsibilities of the NGOs. As you may know, in the past few years in China, the NGOs has been prospering in this country, but still there are certain taboos preventing them from further growth. And this time, the plan has already outlined very clearly. It is encouraging NGOs in the fields of commerce, science and technology, social issues and charity, as well as rural-based community services. Back to you, Pandong.
Thank you very much indeed, Tianwei. We'll talk to you again very soon. The reorganization of China's central government is drawing extensive attention at home and abroad. In a government work report, Premier Wen Jiabao put forward institutional reform to set up a super ministry system that will integrate the functions of different departments. CCTV News has interviewed one drafter of the State Council restructuring proposal, Mr. Wang Feng. He explains what's behind the reform.
The government is to serve the people. The current institutes under the State Council only carry out the functions of the government. There are still deficiencies in the operating mechanism and institution building. Problems remain in setting up institutions and in clarifying functions. The duties of some departments are unclear. The functions see substantial overlap, which leads to public complaints. This makes it imperative to push forward government restructuring.
Actually, China has conducted many local pilot institutional reforms to improve administrative efficiency. The southern city of Shenzhen has been at the forefront of reform and opening up for more than 2 decades. The local government is continuing to spearhead reform in social society. Shenzhen has been reforming the registration of civic organizations since 2004. It has launched a direct registration of industrial associations at the Civil Affairs Bureau. In 2008, the range was expanded to include 3 other categories of social organizations, which are covering the economy, social and public welfare. The city will now broaden its governmental management reforms to help more social organizations register directly at the Civil Affairs Bureau without pre-examination by a supervising department. For more insight on China's government reorganization plan, we're joined in the studio by Mr. Wang Xuewen. He is the former Deputy Editor-in-Chief of the International Business Daily. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Wang. So, actually, China has been carrying out government restructuring for quite several years. So what are the unique features of this time's reorganization plan?
And to be exact, China has been carrying on restructuring our state council departments for 3 decades. And of course, in the past 5 years, since 2008, that's the session of the last government, the previous government, and the reform has quickened the step. And this time, the total number of ministries or ministerial level departments under the State Council has been reduced to 25. That's a big stride. But the average number of ministries in a developed countries is 15. But of course, it's not a simple comparison between the number of ministries. And the ultimate aim of China's reform is to realize a small government, large society, and separation of functions between the government and the society, and between the government and the society, between the government enterprises, and between the government and the market. That's our ultimate aim. And I would rather call it streamlining the different ministries and organizations rather than physical combination or separation of ministries. So what we must see is the final effect is streamlining the inner function of the ministries. But this time, the railway ministry was removed, was eliminated. And this is a typical example of separating the administrative function of the ministries from its function from enterprises, because the railway ministry has been very typical in combining the administration of the state and enterprises. But this time, the state administration mandate has been combined with the Ministry of Communication and Transportation, and the enterprise function has been left to the Railway Corporation. I think that's a good separation. And I wonder whether I have time to talk about the other ministries, other ministries. For instance, the Marine Administration. That's quite necessary. It's a must, especially at the present stage, because China has to safeguard its marine sovereignty and territorial integrity. We need a unified organization to guide all those actions, so it's a must. And family planning and health ministry was combined. That's also quite necessary. That shows the present leadership has a far-sighted view, because some people say China has come to a juncture of its reform. The population dividend is almost used over, and China is beginning to get into an old age society before it was really rich. So family planning is very important, and maybe we should readjust our policy beforehand.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wang. Indeed, so we could see that this reorganization is in pace with China's reform and the changing environment, both domestically and internationally. Thank you very much again. Mr. Wang Xuewen, former Deputy Editor-in-Chief of the International Business Daily. Well, China's Procurator General has spelled out the mission of his agency to the joint session of lawmakers and political advisers, investigation and prevention of abuse of power. He's released the latest figures on corruption cases during the 5-year term office. Our reporter Han Bing tells us that while lawmakers and advisers believe China is intensifying its crackdown on corruption, people believe punishment alone will not get root of the matter.
On their way to fight corruption and make their voices heard is a key mission for the lawmakers.
It's not enough to make general policies. We need specific measures, like publicizing official assets and making an anti-corruption law. We should strengthen law enforcement to reduce the opportunity for crime.
We should not only focus on enforcement, but also stress prevention to curb corruption at its roots.
Reporting to the lawmakers and political advisers, Procurator General Cao Jianming laid out the investigation and prevention of power abuse over the past 5 years. He says more than 210,000 officials have been investigated for graft and infringement of people's rights. More than 13,000 are above the county level and 30 at provincial and ministerial levels. The long list of punished officials includes the former railway minister Liu Zhijun, former deputy director of the General Logistics Department of the PLA Gu Junshan, and former deputy party secretary of Sichuan province Li Chuncheng. The Procurator General promised continual investigations and to create a monitoring mechanism. The anti-graft fight featured prominently in the government work report at the opening of the Congress. Premier Wen Jiabao called for reducing excessive concentration of power and improving the checks on power. China's new leader Xi Jinping has warned that corruption threatens the party's survival. He's launched a campaign to prevent waste and graft. Public expectations have been raised, yet the public wants to see convincing signs that the winds of change will last beyond the 2 sessions. China's fight against corruption has been going on for decades, but the new figures on corrupt officials leave many feeling the problem is getting worse. On becoming party chief, Xi Jinping spoke about putting power into an institutional cage. But many say that determination and supervision aren't enough. What they want is an effective mechanism to get the roots of that problem. And much more needs to be done for the new leadership to make that fundamental change. Han Bin, CCTV, Beijing.
For more on China's anti-corruption drive, let's cross live again to my colleague Tian Wei at Great Hall of the People in central Beijing. Hello again, Tian Wei. We know that considerable efforts have been made to fight corruption, but what are the challenges?
Well, as you may know, and also indicated by our previous report, that there is the political slogan already popular in China of putting the power in the cage of laws and also regulations. However, how the result is likely to be, it depends on a lot of factors. Earlier, our reporter already talking about the establishment of the system in which it would prevent the further escalation of corruption in this country. There is also a lot of talk of the NPC deputies and CPPCC members over the past few days. They advocated stiffer punishment of those officials who already committed corruptive crimes. They indicate that it is extremely important to go around with this public campaign, publicizing some of the most important cases so that the others who are on the verge of committing corruptive crimes can be deterred. They say, of course, this is not the long-term way of solving corruption problem in this country, but it is certainly going to be really quite effective in the short term. And they say the reason why to address the short-term problem is it could buy time for further capital and political capital in the future to let the administration to take more effective measures against corruption in a fundamental way. Back to you, Pandang.
Thank you very much, Tian Wei, indeed. China's anti-corruption campaign has been welcomed by the public. It's extremely important, though, for the ruling party itself to clean up its own house so the campaign is sustainable and addresses the root problems. CCTV News senior reporter Tian Wei spoke to Rita Fan, a member of China's top legislature who used to serve as the president of Hong Kong Legislative Council, about Hong Kong's anti-corruption experience. She says the Chinese mainland can learn from it.
It has been in China for thousands of years, but that doesn't mean that we have to accept it. And I think the determination at the very top to do this, and they have to do it all the time, not just for a year or two, but 10 years, if it needed to be 15 years, and insist on improving the system, ruling out, removing all the loopholes that allow opportunity for corruption, simplifying the procedures so that the opportunity of abuse of power by the officials is reduced.
There have been measures taken by the officials elected recently as the top leadership of the Chinese CPC. However, some argue that this is a long process, and what is being done right now is possibly things still on the surface. But how to go deep and really root out corruption, that is the real challenge.
Well, I think, yes, you can, first of all, your first target is to remove things, remove corruption from the easily visible places. For example, from the departments which have direct contact with our people. Right? And that's not difficult. That's relatively possible. And then, from the very top, you have to get officials to, for example, declare their interest. I know there are a lot of resistance to this, but I think it should be done. And I think there are Guangdong province may be one of the possible places to do it, because Guangdong province goes quicker ahead
in history.
In history, so maybe they could do it first, and after that, of course, all our leadership, the highest leadership, must be examples, be models of this anti-corruption move. Their decision-taking process should be more transparent, because the less transparent it is, it will breed more corruption. So, and then the most important thing perhaps is to change the public attitude. But the public attitude will not be changed until they perceive a kind of government which is clean and also willing to serve the people. This is a change of concept.
The political system in China is, of course, quite different, let's say, from the US, or even from that in Hong Kong, one country, two systems anyway. And therefore, is it possible for the ruling party, the Chinese Communist Party, to monitor itself?
Well, you see, for an organization to want to be free of corruption, they must first of all make sure that people in that organization work in a relatively transparent manner. Secondly, the views from the bottom strata of that organization must be heard, and the people who are maybe at the bottom, who are not the powerful people, their views must be respected. Well, they may not always be right, but you have to be diligent in ensuring that if something they say makes sense, you implement it. So in the Chinese Communist Party, it is the same. The Chinese Communist Party is the ruling party of China, and it is so important that if their house is in order, then China will be in order.
Rita Fan, thank you so much for being with us. All the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, for more on the work reports of China's Supreme People's Court and the Supreme People's Procuratorate, we're joined on the phone by Professor Liu Renwen. He is the Director of the Criminal Law Department at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Thank you very much for talking to us, Professor. So tell us, what do you think are the highlights of the work reports of these two institutions?
Hello. I think these two reports is very impressive for me. For example, the People's Supreme Court, of course, they have many highlights, but the deepest points for me, I think, first is that they told us the cases accepted by the Supreme Court and the local courts last year have raised up to more than 170 cases compared with the last year. So this means that the courts accepted much more cases than the past year. This means the people's courts plays more and more important role in our society. And I also think that more interest conflicts in our social transitions need the help from the judges and the court. The second highlight for me, I think, is that the Supreme Court think that they needed to deepen the judicial reform. And they also told us that the independent and the fair justice still have many difficulties, and that the people not satisfied to their work. So they need to pay more attention to make their work much more independent and fair.
Well, talking about more independency, Professor, let's talk about China's legal supervisor, which is the Supreme People's Procuratorate. How do you think about its work so far?
Yeah, according to our constitution, you are right. Our Supreme People's Procuratorate plays a very important role in our legal society. I think their courts, their report told us, first, I think last year they charged the crimes as prosecutors, and they want to punish the crimes for anti-corruption and also to solve the people's livelihood. And the second, I think there's legal supervision to the police, to the court, or to the other government departments. So they play a very important role for the legal supervision. The third one is, I think, they deal with many anti-corruption cases and punish many corruptions. So I think this is a very important job for they have done. Of course, they also say their jobs have distance with the people's wishes. So they need to improve their works in this year.
Thank you very much, Professor. Indeed, lots of work ahead indeed. Professor Liu Renwen from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Many would agree that one effective way to curb corruption is to improve China's justice system. General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee, Xi Jinping, has called for efforts to ensure judicial independence, and his remarks have had a positive response from the public. Our reporter Han Bing has been speaking to participants at the ongoing political meetings, as well as members of the public, to find out how a better legal system can be achieved and used to improve social fairness.
At last, a chance to get paid. Every day, dozens of migrant workers come to this legal aid center in Beijing. Many find it difficult to gain access to China's judicial system, so they come here for free consultations. Yuan Jiancai is a frequent visitor. His brother died in a work-related accident 5 years ago. Since then, he's been to court more than a dozen times, trying to get compensation.
It takes too long to win a case, and the money we get back is not worth the effort. I could have earned more working in a job.
Yuan Jiancai says he wants justice and won't give up the fight. Many lawyers say migrant workers are handicapped by a lack of evidence, while some trials are hampered by abuse of power.
The most important thing is for the government to strengthen supervision. We can't expect migrant workers to learn how to protect themselves by law.
China says it's established a comprehensive legal system, but many believe the weak links are still enforcement. For years, Zhu Zhengfu has been raising proposals aimed at pushing lawmakers to improve the regulation of the justice system.
Many ordinary people have to give up their rights because they can't afford the legal costs. The government could pay for lawyers so that all people can enjoy equal rights under legal aid.
Zhu Zhengfu says the core of any justice system must be independent with no commercial or government interference. He says it's encouraged that the country's top leader has now sent a strong message on the rule of law. Zhu Zhengfu's ideas are shared by many scholars like Professor Yu Jianrong. He's put together a package of proposals to reform the current legal system. It includes greater declaration of property interests by officials and the ending of the need for lawyers to rely on local governments.
I'm confident about the reforms to China's legal system. Without justice and progress, without judicial independence, China will not achieve real progress in the future.
In the past few decades, China has sped up introduction of legislation and set up more courts to strengthen the country's judicial system. Yet many believe much more needs to be done to ensure equal rights for everyone. But it might take many more years yet for that goal to be fully realized. For Yuan Jiancai and the many thousands of others working hard to achieve justice, there may not always be a victory at the end of their case, but at least they have a chance to argue it. Han Bin, CCTV.
Now it's time for our special section, Focus Group. In South China's Guangdong province, it had been at the forefront of China's reform and opening up policy, and now it's been chosen again as the pioneer for a series of anti-corruption policies. Our reporter Liao Ruochun joins us now live from Guangzhou to discuss China's anti-corruption campaign. Hello there, Ruochun. How's the preparation going on there, and who are we going to meet today?
Hello, Pandeng. I'm now at the campus of South China University of Technology here at Guangzhou's University Town. It's a cluster of 10 universities and it's designed to be the intellectual center of Guangzhou. And here today, we're honored to be joined by a think tank made up by the experts in the field of law. Firstly, we have Professor Wu Jiaqing, Professor Yu Jun, Professor Wang Yan, and Dr. Feng Jianpeng. Welcome, everyone. These professors are experts in the field of constitution and prosecution law. They will be joining our discussion today about China's fight against corruption. Pandeng.
Well, Ruochun, what could be the focus of today's discussion? What's your plan?
Right, back in Beijing, the CPPCC member Mao Xingyu said that the key of fighting corruption is giving more supervisory power to the people. But quite often we find that this right of the people is being trampled. So his words immediately won the support from many people. So we will be asking our guests here today, do you think that is the problem we are facing right now? And do you agree with his opinions?
Well, I'd say the word given is not precise in terms of law.
And why is that?
The power of supervision is not given by anybody. It's a very basic rights of people, and it's written in our Constitution of People's Republic of China in the Article 41. So the supervision of power, supervision of people, is it's more effective, extensive, and more spontaneous than any government departments or the law enforcement bodies. So we have a very good saying, say the people's eyes are the sharpest.
Yes.
So the participation of everybody to prevent corruption is the most effective way.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So it is agreed that the people plays an important role in fighting against corruption. But as Mao Xingyu said, quite often we find that this right is being trampled so that people cannot exercise their right of supervision. So how do we solve the problem here?
I think there are several reasons cause these problems. Although our constitution recognized the people's power of supervision, there's no detailed recognized to protect this power. So common people don't know how to use it. On the other hand, sometimes recognized are not carried through. For example, the Act on Freedom of Information says that people can ask government to publicize the information concerning public interest.
Yes.
But in reality, the government often find the kinds of excuse to refuse people. They say the information is classified or sensitive. So likely recently the soil pollution problem.
Soil pollution problem, yes.
It's a problem concerns everybody's health. It is also classified. So the answer is not accepted by the people.
Yes, indeed. Sometimes it could be very difficult for ordinary people to appeal directly to the government. But recently there's something new called the Grassroots Anti-Corruption Campaign. And it's mainly on the internet and on the microblog that we're quite familiar with. So do you think this is also a kind of supervision carried out by the people in a different way?
Yes, I think it's a very good thing. Now everyone has a cell phone, so we can take pictures and post them on internet easily. For example, the housing sister and the director who has dozens of luxury watches, both of them were expert on internet at first. So it may be the easiest way for common people to fight against the corruption. But we should see that the internet is a very new method for people to supervising. So it must be integrated into a system to play a more positive role.
Right. Sorry to interrupt you, but you mentioned a very interesting example just now, the housing sister. Now, she was found to have 41 houses in Beijing, so the Chinese netizens gave her the nickname of housing sister. So what do you think is the lesson that we can learn from this particular case?
Well, I think this event shows how important to complete our legislation system. We know that the economy of China is developing very fast. It's called China speed. And some place is developing even faster than China speed.
Yes.
But the pace of legislation is falling behind the economy. So we can find many areas where it's not covered by our law became the place for corruption growing. So the legislation system, I think, is the key.
Sorry. I don't agree with you. In this case, the housing sister has several identities and 41 houses in Beijing, but common one can only buy 2 houses.
Yes.
We already have several laws, but she's easy to bypass. So I think good law or good policy need people to carry out. So the people is the key in this.
So, but what are you saying is still rely on system. We know a good political system or a legal system is to reduce the influence of people to the minimum.
Right, thank you. So now we have 2 different views here. So Dr. Feng said that China needs to complete a system against corruption, while Professor Yu here think that the people, or rather the social moral standard, plays an important role in this.
I'm sorry. I also think the moral is very important, but moral is just a kind of guidance.
Yes.
It's not mandatory.
Right, thank you. Now, since we're talking about the supervision of people here, let's turn to our audience, the students of law. Those of you who agree that the system is more important, please raise your hand. Right, and those of you who think that the people plays a more important part, please raise your hand. Right, here we have the numbers. Let's ask the second gentleman over there. So why did you choose to support Dr. Feng's opinion?
Okay, although I study under Professor Yu, this time I will support Dr. Feng. I think the system is really very important because no one is immune to temptations. You know, a complete system is just like the traffic regulations. That's all.
Okay, thank you. So here we are, the voice of the people.
I would like to add a few points. In fact, these 2 opinions are not completely opposite to each other.
Right.
They may be relying on each other. For example, in the 70s of last century, Hong Kong is having very serious corruption problems. But they set up the ICC and carry out the policy effectively.
Yes.
So they changed the image of Hong Kong successfully. Another example is Russia. Although in recent years, Russia has made several legislation on publicizing property of government officials, But according to the survey done by some NGO,
yes,
Russia is still having trouble with corruption problems.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing us with these examples. Let's come back to our topic. Let's ask Professor Wu, what do you think is the definition of a good system against corruption? And in that system, how does it protect people's right of supervision?
I prefer to speak Chinese because I find I can express my idea better in Chinese.
Yes, please.
首先呢，我认为啊，一个制度反腐制度是不是好，关键不在于是建立了多少反腐的机构，也不在于反腐投入了多少钱，而在于真正的建立了没有有效的制约公权力的这样一种机制。像刚才我们讨论的这个户口制度、住房限购制度等等，像这些充其量也只是限制我们一些普通的老百姓，官员他是很容易逃避的。像这样的反腐有什么效果呢？我看很难有什么真正的效果。
Okay, thank you. Professor Wu said that when we're talking about a good system against corruption, the key is to restrain power itself, like the household registration law and the law on real estate ownership we have mentioned. It has a restraint on common people. For those who hold the power, it is easily bypassed. So we need a complete system against corruption. And now only when everyone is aware of their constitutional rights, then we have a complete system against corruption.
这当前关键。
Well, thank you very much, Roger, indeed. Well, thank you very much for the lively and thought-provoking discussion. Our reporter Liao Ruochen in South China's Guangzhou City. You're watching NewsHour on CCTV News. Coming up. South Korea and the United States are set for more joint drills, which the DPRK labels a hostile act. And politics after Chavez, Venezuela's acting president, Nicolas Maduro, calls elections on April the 14th. Turning to Northeast Asia now, South Korea and the United States are set to start their annual joint military drills on Monday. The computer-based simulation called Key Resolve aims to improve the combined forces' operation and combat capabilities. The exercise will involve about 10,000 South Korean and 3,500 US troops in testing various scenarios. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff will play a leading role in conducting operations. The DPRK is calling the drills a hostile act that has boosted its defenses. The two allies are now holding the Foe Eagle joint military exercise that started on March the 1st. The 6-day drill involves a set of land, sea and air maneuvers. It involves about 200,000 South Korean and 10,000 US troops. Since February this year, South Korea and the United States have held 3 joint military exercises. Some analysts say the drills are intended to deter the DPRK aimed amid worsening situation on the Korean Peninsula. For more on the joint military drills, let's talk to our correspondent Eugene Zhang in Seoul. Hello, Eugene. Good to see you again. So tell us more about growing tensions on the Korean Peninsula.
That's right. On March 5th, the DPRK came out with a surprise announcement that they will scrap the Korean War ceasefire agreement and disconnect the U.S. DPRK hotline at the truce village of Panmunjom. South Korea's military believes this is a move to pressure Washington. In other words, Pyongyang is trying again to make the United States agree to a peace treaty instead of an armistice by displaying their dissatisfaction against the UN's latest resolution and the U.S. ROK joint military exercises. Now, 2 days after that, the DPRK's leader, Kim Jong-un, paid a visit to the military base that shelled Yeonpyeong Island in 2010 to encourage soldiers there. On the same day, Pyongyang also talked of preemptive nuclear strikes and hinted that a second Korean War may happen. And 30 hours after the UN Security Council unanimously adopted the latest resolution against the DPRK, Pyongyang said they would nullify the non-aggression agreement between the two Koreas and threatened to sever its emergency hotline with Seoul, again raising the possibility for military action. This coming week, the DPRK will also hold military exercises near the border. Now, local experts in South Korea say the best way to alleviate tensions and avoid military conflict is through engagement with the DPRK and that South Korea, China, and the United States should play an active role in making this happen.
Well, Eugene, it looks like tensions are high and the stakes are high on the Korean Peninsula. So how are the South Korean government and people reacting to this tension?
Well, South Korea's new president, Park Geun-hye, said on Friday that she will act strongly with the DPRK's provocations. And yesterday, local news released 5 likely worst-case scenarios that are being discussed by the presidential office in South Korea. The 5 include local provocations similar to shelling of Yeonpyeong Island 2.5 years ago, a similar provocation aimed at the capital city, or provocations on various locations in South Korea at the same time, or even a 4th nuclear test. The new Prime Minister Chung Hong-won also stressed the importance of preparing for any cyber terror attacks from the north. Again, these are just worst-case scenarios, but one expert in Seoul said a direct military provocation is unlikely, looking at similar cases in the past when the DPRK also threatened to nullify the armistice. Now, if you're an average South Korean citizen, this situation on the Korean Peninsula right now will affect you in different ways depending on where you live. For those living closer to the border, such as Baekneung Island or Yeonpyeong Island, and you went through that terrifying situation in 2010, the current exchange rhetoric may keep you up at night. A KBS report said yesterday that underground shelters are now open to the public at Baekneung Island. They're empty at the moment, but may be needed if tensions should rise further. But out in the streets of Seoul, it's business as usual. There aren't any visible signs of worry, and markets were not affected much last week. And in fact, the Unification Ministry said people were coming in and out of the Kaesong Industrial Complex in the DPRK as usual so far. Pandang.
Thank you very much, Eugene, for a detailed report. Our correspondent, Eugene Zhang, in Seoul. Turning to Pakistan now, a mob of hundreds of people have attacked a Christian neighborhood and set fire to Christian homes in the eastern city of Lahore. The rampage came after reports that a Christian man had committed blasphemy against Islam's prophet. Witnesses say that trouble began on Friday when a young Muslim man accused a Christian man of committing blasphemy. Police have arrested a Christian man on charges of blasphemy, but one group insisted that the police should hand him over to them. The local police officials said violence erupted when he refused their request. About 50 homes were torched. No one in the Christian community was hurt, according to the police. Dozens of Christians protested in Karachi on Saturday, hours after the violence. In Venezuela, people will go to the polls to elect a new president on April the 14th. Vice President Nicolas Maduro has been sworn in as the country's acting president. Stephen Gibbs reports from Caracas.
Venezuela has a new acting president. At his swearing-in ceremony, an emotional Nicolas Maduro said the presidential sash he was wearing rightfully belonged to his mentor, Hugo Chavez. The Venezuelan opposition says he shouldn't be wearing it at all. It says that the country's constitution clearly states that the stand-in president should in fact be this man, the head of the National Assembly. Either way, Venezuelans now need to prepare for fresh presidential elections. And it looks like the government is in a very strong position. 2 million Venezuelans have filed past the former president's coffin so far, in what is turning into a display of national pride.
And these supporters of the president have already made their minds up about who they'll be voting for.
Yes, it is automatic. We need to vote for Maduro because that was what Hugo Chavez said before he went to Cuba. He said that if anything happens to him, then our next option is Maduro, and we are going to follow that direction.
We are going to continue this process with our president-elect now, Nicolas Maduro, because our commander-in-chief, Hugo Chavez, asked it of us, and that order we will follow to our last breath.
The Venezuelan opposition, which in last October's elections got almost 45% of the vote, says it will put forward the same candidate as last October, State Governor Enrique Capriles. Stephen Gibbs, CCTV, Caracas.
Still in Venezuela, acting President Nicolas Maduro has met China's Special Envoy Zhang Ping in his first official meeting after being sworn into office on Friday. Zhang Ping is the chairman of China's National Development and Reform Committee. He expressed deep condolences on Chávez's passing. He said the relationship between the two countries greatly improved during Hugo Chávez's administration. Maduro referred to the improved diplomatic relationship as a precious legacy left by the former president. After the meeting, Maduro gave an exclusive interview to CCTV.
China has made significant contribution to the global economy and world peace. Under the leadership of President Chávez, Venezuela and China have established a strategic partnership, which is set to progress in the future.
Turning to Africa now, where there is an increasing number of people curious about Chinese culture. A special school in South African capital of Pretoria is doing its part to educate kids from all over the continent.
The Pretoria Chinese School opened its doors in South Africa 79 years ago. The land for the first school buildings had to be purchased by the Chinese consulate because Chinese immigrants faced discrimination and racism under the old white apartheid government. Back then, Chinese immigrants were denied citizenship. Things have changed dramatically since then, with political, economic and cultural ties between the new South Africa and China growing stronger with each passing year, just like the educational and cultural exchange at this uniquely South African Chinese school. There are nearly 500 learners at this multicultural school, aged between 4 and around 17 years old. And it's compulsory for all of them to study Mandarin.
中文很好玩，因为我们跟我们的朋友都一起玩。
Chinese is nice to do because we can do it with our friends at the same time.
It makes me proud as a Chinese person that everyone wants to be a part of the Chinese culture.
As South Africans, we are exposed to many very different cultures, but being exposed to Chinese, it's completely different. It broadens your horizons like you cannot believe.
Most parents that enroll their children at our school not only do it for the academic excellence, but also for the values that the Chinese culture instill, the values of discipline and respect and humility, which are very important at this school.
The most enjoyable part about my teaching or my job is that from a child, they started with nothing. They don't know any Chinese at all, and then they start learning the greeting words and the numbers and the counting, and then simple songs and basic sentence structures and all that, and gradually they are able to understand a bit and speak a little bit. So that, to me, it makes my job very rewarding.
When we came to the Pretoria Chinese School, we really liked the feel of the school, the size of the classrooms, as well as whether our children can fit in here or not. Especially given our religion and things like that. And it was very accommodating to our culture and our religion, as well as we wanted to instill the Chinese culture in our children as well, because it gives them a better opportunity going forward.
We look at the business side of, you know, where we're going to be in the future, and obviously Chinese is the future. It's where everyone's going. It's where the world is going.
As a Chinese, I'm really excited, and I've been very touched.
I like that because there's a lot of races, so we can understand different cultures from different countries. 学中文很特别，因为他们中国人像我家人。我们的学校很小，所以我跟他们是一个家人，一个家庭，所以我很开心。
Learning Chinese is very special because our school is very close-knit, so we can now all communicate in Chinese and we're just like one big family.
Renadal Khan, CCTV, Pretoria.
In Israel, a flashy new business venture is turning heads and keeping urban commuters entertained and happy. Stephanie Fried reports from Tel Aviv.
From Berlin to Manhattan to Beijing,
A staple of the urban experience is cabbing it. Waiting, hailing, and forking over hard-earned cash for backseat travel. But what if moving from place to place took a different turn?
Welcome to the karaoke taxi. You want to sing?
To sing?
Sing, yeah. Sing 80s music. You like this, baby?
The latest in Tel Aviv travel, an entertainment center on wheels. Karaoke taxi is exactly what it sounds like. A cab decked out with a karaoke machine, professional mixer, separate microphones for driver and passengers, a double subwoofer, 3 display screens, 10 speakers, a big dose of flash, and lots of tchotchkes. The entrepreneur driver invested $10,000 into this rolling business that he says is the only venture of its kind in town.
You know what? Really good singers get a bonus, a free ride home at the end of the night.
There's no getting around the element of fun here.
So, how was it?
Wow, amazing.
First time?
Yes, the driver is funny and it's fun to go with the driver and the music.
Cruising city streets, the novel and loud transport mode is a definite attention magnet. Some drivers admire the initiative, but say they're sticking with old school. Do you think he makes more money than you do?
Yeah.
Really?
Because all the kids like him, you know, all the karaoke, all the music, all the lights. So people like it. I don't like this one. I like quiet life.
Yossi says singing in transit makes people happy. Most of his passengers, doctors, lawyers, and politicians included, grab the mic and give it a go.
There's no doubt about the fact that this is a fun experience, and people say that traveling in the karaoke taxi makes parting with the money at the end of the ride a little bit easier.
Stephanie Fried, CCTV, Tel Aviv.
Well, while you're entertained, always remember to drive safely. And that's it for this edition of NewsHour on CCTV News. I'm Pan Deng in Beijing. Bye-bye.
To the country's top oceanic administration to enhance maritime law enforcement and better protect and use its oceanic resources. The restructured State Oceanic Administration will report to the Ministry of Land and Resources, and a high-level National Oceanic Commission will be established to strengthen overall planning and comprehensive coordination of maritime affairs. The reorganization plan also includes the restructure of the National Energy Administration. A new administration will be formed by merging the National Energy Administration and the State Electricity Regulatory Commission. The proposed administration's responsibilities include drawing up and carrying out energy development strategy, planning and policies, studying and proposing energy system reforms, and energy supervision and management.
For more on this ambitious plan, let's cross live to my colleague Tian Wei at Great Hall of the People in central Beijing. Hello, Tian Wei. First, can you tell us why it's necessary to carry out this reorganization?
Well, Pan Deng, this is supposed to be the 7th largest government restructuring in decades for the Chinese government, and also it is the biggest since 1998. There are several issues it seems that the government restructuring plan this time are likely to address. Many of them are quite controversial issues or urgent issues that the Chinese society has to face right now. For example, the Ministry of Railway, it used to play a role of both an administrative power and also providing services. Certainly there's a conflict of interest, and now it's being divided into two parts, the administrative branch and then the commercial entity. There are also issues that are very important for the Chinese society to face, for example, the safety of the drug and food. And that is why the National Administration of Food and Drug Safety has been elevated to a national level to embody this organization to have more power to monitor the situation. And meanwhile, there's the merge of both the Ministry of Health and the Administration of Population and Family Planning. As you may know, once this merge has already been done, this organization is going to play a huge role in China's healthcare reform, as well as designing and readjusting the family planning policy for the current changes of China's demography. And then there is also the
The Secretary-General of the State Council, Ma Kai, has delivered a plan to restructure government at the annual session of the country's top legislature. The proposal dissolves 4 ministry-level institutes and cuts out 2 ministries and commissions. After the reorganization, the State Council will have 25 ministries and commissions.
This round of reform is a targeted and efficient approach. It aims at making breakthroughs in some important areas and solving difficult social issues to promote economic development. The reform is to create a sound development environment for the government, provide high-quality public services, and maintain just and fair social order. It focuses on clarifying the role of government in developing the market and society.
Now let's take a look at the main points of the State Council's reorganization plan.
China will split the Ministry of Railways into administrative and commercial arms. The proposed State Railway Administration, to be supervised by the Ministry of Transport, will run the existing Railway Ministry's administrative functions. The proposed China Railway Corporation will run the passenger and freight operations. Also, China plans to set up a National Health and Family Planning Commission by merging the existing Health Ministry with the National Population and Family Planning Commission. The existing state administration of traditional Chinese medicine, currently affiliated with the Health Ministry, will be administered by the proposed National Health and Family Planning Commission. Further changes will be made to Food and Drug Administration to enhance safety and quality. The proposed ministry-level general administration will be responsible for supervising food and drug safety in the process of production, circulation, and consumption. To step up cultural reform and coordinate resources of each sector, the existing General Administration of Press and Publication and the State Administration of Radio, Film, and Television will be integrated into one single regulatory authority. Its work will focus on the planning of the development of the sectors, supervising the contents and quality of institutions, publications, and programs, and administering copyright. The State Council also plans to restructure
Improving government efficiency, China announces a major overhaul of government agencies under the State Council. Rooting out corruption, China's top justice and procurator delivered reports on efforts to stamp out what's been called the biggest threat to the ruling party's survival. South Korea and the United States are set for more joint drills, which the DPRK labels a hostile act. And politics after Chavez. Venezuela's acting president Nicolas Maduro calls elections on April the 14th. Hello there, welcome to News Hour on CCTV News. Live from Beijing, I'm Pan Dong. We start this program with the latest from China's annual political season.